clearing that events, removing that single event, removing all the events here. First, import the event using require function. Then initialize the event. We have seen that how to import the events and how to initialize the event emitter instances. See here, variable event emitter is equals to new event emitter. Okay, this is the way we can initialize that event emitter instances. Then here you can see the events where jig1 is equals to message. This is the event. Okay, and what it contains, we are going to print that message, like message from jig1, that is plus message from jig1 with the message we are going to add here as a event. Then similarly, variable where jig2 is equals to message console.log message from jig2 plus message. Okay, then here now we have to register these two listeners here, jig1 and jig2 here, like event emitter dot on, that event name is my event and the listener, that is jig1 and jig2. Here you can see we have registered that jig1 listener twice. Okay, here you can see. Then next event is event emitter dot my event jig2. Okay, so now here you can see removing listener jig1 here, this that are registered on this line 13. Yeah, we are going to removing that listener. How to remove this? Like event emitter dot remove listener, inside the bracket pass that event comma listener, that is event name is my event comma jig1, that we are going to remove here. Now we are going to trigger that event. How to trigger that event? Event emitter dot emit, inside the bracket event name, that is my event comma event occurred. And next we are going to remove all the listeners from this event. So similarly, like event emitter dot remove all listeners and give that event name. Here you can see we have just give that event as a my event. And then we are going to trigger another event, event emitter dot my event comma error occurred. Okay, so here you can see we have given that message error occurred. Okay, so it will print like message from, after executing this we will get output as message from jig1, because here you can see we have added twice this, we have registered this event listener twice. So for after that we have remove this listener and we are remaining with jig1 and jig2. So first it will print message from jig1, that is event occurred. Then it will remove all the listeners. Then it will print message from jig2, that is error, sorry, event occurred. Okay, then here you can see we have registered with two times jig1, we have registered two times and one time, that is jig2. For calling that event emitter dot remove listener, that is my event dot jig1, one instance of that jig1 will be removed. We have seen that it will be removed. Then finally we are going to remove all the listeners by using that remove all listeners method, that will remove all the listeners to my event. Then here you can see some special events. So all event emitter instances emit the event, all event emitter instances emit the event new listener when new listeners are added. When new listeners are added, it will emit the event new listener. And when that existing listeners are removed, that is remove listeners. These are the special events, that is new listener and remove the listeners. Here next one is event. Event is new listener. Okay, so new listener is, that is the event emitter instances will emit its own new listener. Its own new listener event before a listener is added to its internal array of listeners. It emits its own new listener when it is when it is before adding to that internal array of listeners. Then listener register for the new listener event, it will be passed to the event name and reference to the listener being added. Then the event new listener is triggered before adding the listener to the array. Here you can see we are going to add that listener once and register with that listener. Here see the syntax, that is event emitter dot once, inside the bracket new listener is added, comma the listener, another listener. Here see the listener. We are going to register or we are going to add that listener itself here. See, that is that instance will emit its own new listener event before a listener is added to its internal array. Here event emitter dot on. Now we are going to register with that event. Okay, that is new listener comma listener. This listener will be registered with the new listener. Then next event is remove listener. The remove listener event is emitted after a listener is removed. After that listener is removed, it will emit that remove listener. So see the syntax for that event emitter dot once remove listener comma listener and register with that remove listener like event emitter dot on remove listener comma that listener. That listener is registered with the remove listener. So next event is error. When an error occurs with an event emitter instance, the typical action is for an error event to be emitted. So when any particular error occurs with an event emitter instance, that action like error event to be emitted. If an event emitter does not have at least one listener registered for the error event and an error event is emitted, then the error is thrown and a stack trace is printed and that node.js process is exists. Okay, so see that syntax for registering with the error event emitter dot on then error comma listener. Yeah, we will see the example for all these adding registering for new listener, registering for remove listener. Okay, so see here first we have to import that events like constant event emitter is equals to require and events is the module. Then initialize the event emitter instances like where event emitter is equals to new event emitter. Then we have to register to error. Here you can see now we are going to register to the error like event emitter dot on. See here we are going to register, that's why on in bracket then error comma the listener is error here. It contains one message to be print, that is console dot error attention there was an error. Okay, so this is the way we can registering to error. Okay, then we are to register we are going to register to new listener, that is event emitter dot on then new listener, and this is another listener, that is event comma listener. That is we are going to print the message like console dot log the listener is added to that particular event. Here you can see inside that curly bracket event. Okay, that event name is like my event. Here we are going to add that. Then we have to register to remove listener, so that event emitter dot on that remove listener comma event, that particular event and the listener contains that console dot log message, that is the listener is removed from that particular event. Okay, then we are going to declare the listeners jig1 to my event 1. Okay, that my jig1 listener contains one message, that is console.log message from jig1 and the message that we are going to trigger at the end. Then another listeners we are going to declare here jig2 to my event 2. These are two events, my event 1 and my event 2. So we are going to register for new listener and remove listener, and we are going to declare these two listeners, that is jig1 and jig2 to my event 1 and my event 2. Okay, so that jig2 contains another message like message from jig2 and that particular message we are going to trigger.